Okay. Is everybody here who we need to have here? I don't know who is doing the Resilient Oahu account, but I don't know if it's Director Gonzer or if it's somebody else.
It says we're streaming live now.
Okay, I see that Director Gonzer is now online. Aloha and good morning, everybody. I would like to get this commission meeting started. And if Karan is there, let's get started with the roll call. I call this
Sure.
meeting.
Yeah, thank you. I'll take roll today, Chair. Chair Aligato,
Present.
Vice Chair Keener,
President,
Commissioner Otsuka,
Present.
Commissioner Romine,
Present.
Commissioner Islam is absent today. Chair, we have quorum.
Wonderful. Okay, let's just get things started. Our next item on our agenda is approval of the minutes, and this time we have two commission meetings to approve the minutes for. So I'll just take it in order. Let's start with the September 29th minutes. Just wanted to ask my fellow commissioners if you had any comments on the minutes, any corrections.
None for me, Chair. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Vicky, do you have any?
no corrections for me.
And Kiana?
Yep, no corrections.
Okay, perfect. We'll just hold on to that vote. Maybe we can, I don't know, Matt, can I vote on both things at one time or do I have to do one at a time?
You can consider them both.
Okay, let's move on to the October 27th minutes. Are there any comments or corrections, feedbacks, or updates that we need to make to that? I'll start with Brad. Do you have any corrections to the 27th?
None to those minutes either, Chair. Thanks.
Kiana
No corrections.
and Vicky.
No corrections.
Okay, do I have a motion to adopt the minutes from September 29th as well as October 27th?
I motion that we adopt those both sets of minutes.
Can I get a second?
Second that.
Great. So by show of hands, please raise your hands for everybody who votes to adopt the minutes. Okay, let it show that the four commissioners present are voting to adopt it. And so we will adopt the minutes from the last two commission meetings. Thank you. Thank you to the staff of OCCSR for completing them as always. So now at this time, we'll move on to the report on the activities of the Office of Climate Change, Sustainability and Resilience. And I think Director Gonzer, you're going to be doing that. So take it
Yes.
away.
Yeah, thank you. And I echo your mahalo to Maya for her efforts on the meeting minutes for these really important community discussions. So happy to be with you here this morning, this wet, rainy morning. Matt Gonzer serves as the Executive Director for the City's Office of Climate Change, Sustainability and Resiliency. Obviously a couple of topical items. You know, yesterday concluded our hurricane season for 2023, but obviously we know that rain and flooding can happen anytime, as we're currently seeing through a Kona low, more of our winter rainy weather patterns. So it's just a reminder on preparedness and diligence all year round, in addition to heightened concerns during the hurricane season. Excited to get an update from Vice Chair Keener today on the 5th National Climate Assessment, which came out since the previous commission meeting. And today kicks off the Conference of Parties COP28 meetings and negotiations. Some interesting headlines leading up to it, some interesting headlines already since the start of it. And I look forward to learning about all of the progress along with all of you over the next couple of weeks and hearing from some of our local colleagues who are actually attending across state government. We also have a staff member there supported by an organization that's keen on supporting elevating youth participation in climate discussions. And I'm aware of other nonprofits and other, homegrown tech leaders that are also participating. So it's a really exciting moment. Focusing back to the office in particular and some of our projects, today concludes the public comment period on the draft climate adaptation strategy called Climate Ready Oahu. We were really excited to reconnect with community members all around the island this month through 15 public engagement events, a whole series of virtual public engagement, different news coverage, radio, TV, print media, etc. And in addition to thanking everyone who engaged with us over the last month and the couple of hundred comments that we've already received, wanted to give a special shout out and mahalo to Chair Aligato and Commissioner Otsuka for joining us at Makeke Waianae on Saturday the 18th. That was fun. You guys could see us in action and also be advocates for the draft and enhance community engagement processes as well. Next steps are for us to finalize reviewing, incorporating, and providing responses to the public comments. We'll do that in two ways, providing them directly online through the PDF document. There's bubbles all throughout. A response will go directly back to those responses received, but we'll also compile it into a summary table that shows how things were incorporated, where maybe that comment was addressed already in a different section, or explain why it is not incorporated at this time. And then we're hopeful that folks can see that further reflected in the introduction of a resolution for adoption in early 2024. We should be re-engaging City Council over the next couple of months and anticipate a couple of hearings in the month of February and hopefully concluding it at that time and getting back to the important work of implementation. And already in support of implementation, throughout Climate Ready Oahu, there's really trying to elevate existing tools and resources for any of the actions. We know that a lot more work is needed to be done. We also try to highlight actions that households and individuals can take, but we haven't been waiting for the adoption of the strategy to think about implementing the important things to address the climate hazards. So I'm excited to share that since our last meeting, we've been notified of receipt of an EPA Environmental Justice Government to Government Award to support the Climate Champions Program, which the Commission got a briefing on by Alex Yee a couple of meetings ago. It's not final yet. We have some administrative back and forth with the EPA, but the 6 community-based organizations are excited to get to the work. So we'd be happy to provide an update at a future meeting. And then on urban and community forestry, the city received a direct award through the U.S. Forest Service as part of the Inflation Reduction Act. That also is ongoing finalization with the organization with which we're getting the subaward, but it's really to help focus strategic planning and think about functional planning and really being targeted in where we want to prioritize planting in the near term. And also we've been invited to the state's Kaulunani Urban and Community Forestry full application. We're looking at extensive engagement towards updating rules, regulations, standards, policies, and practices. So right now, there are many different chapters, many different practices for how we manage or require tree planting in new and other development, and even for how we design city, street, and park tree plantings. The thesis is at the same time that temperatures continue to rise, the data shows us that we're actually losing trees and losing canopy. So if the rules were meant to, really facilitate trees, what's up? And if it's not working, how do we re-engage and reassess those practices moving forward? That's the intent. We still have work to do to get the application in. And then a couple of final announcements here. Always want to keep you abreast of projects that we have underway. Wanted to share that we have a new flood insurance outreach project kicking off. So this is supported by FEMA. It's a direct grant to us through their Cooperating Technical Partnership Program. And they have priority interest in flood risk reduction, flood insurance promotion as part of their general approach to keeping people safe. We know insurance really is a risk mitigation measure of last resort. Hopefully you build something in a safe location, you design it to a safe condition so that it can endure through any particular flooding event. And really insurance is that last tool to mitigate residual risk and support not necessarily making you whole again, but facilitating recovery from any particular event. So we'll be developing a lot of outreach material, doing further research on where there might be insurance gaps or why folks recently may have dropped flood insurance, and then use that as a tool for thinking about enhanced flood risk reduction around the island. We're excited to also announce that there's this annual reporting through CDP, which was formerly the Carbon Disclosure Project, assessing climate action and adaptation practices across municipalities and corporations. And we report annually, and we just were notified that we went up from a B to an A- as a result of different climate action and energy efforts, as well as the fledgling, budding climate adaptation work, and we would anticipate even further improvements as we adopt and then implement some of the work moving forward. And this is an element that's reported annually in the city's annual sustainability report. And then two final things on potential grant opportunities for others' awareness. The state, we are working with the state through a partnership towards the EPA's Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program. There's currently a phase 2 opportunity right now for potential implementation monies. And I'll put in the chat a link to an open RFI, and folks can read about that and learn more. And if interested and have ideas for projects that fit the bill, would encourage submitting via that process. And then lastly, just wanted to highlight 2 opportunities for broader community grant opportunities. So these are not things that the city can be the lead or will take the lead, but we want to be a resource should folks have questions or opportunities to partner. Through the Department of Interior, the Office of Native Hawaiian Relations, there's a new Native Hawaiian Climate Resilience Program, Kapapa Huliau, and this is specifically for Native Hawaiian climate resilience, as noted, and again, I'll put it in the chat. We were pleased to have supported some of the community discussions and participated in some of the refinement and the scoping towards it. And big shout out to our climate equity manager, Emily McKinney, for engaging with DOI and community members on that. And then lastly, just last week, the EPA announced a community change grants opportunity. And again, these need to be community-based organization led. They're looking for partnerships between CBOs, but also opportunities for partnerships with a CBO being the lead and working with different levels of government. So I'll make sure to include those in the chat as well. That concludes my report. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gonzer. I want to open it up for any questions from my fellow commissioners first, and then open it up to the public if you have any questions. So I will get started with Kiana. Do you have any questions?
I was just curious more about the DOI grant. I didn't have a specific question. I'm just really excited about it. So no questions from me other than looking forward to looking through the link, or if there's anything else you want to share. Thank you.
No, I'm light on the details this morning, but I'll make sure to provide it right here.
Thanks. Brad, do you have any questions?
Yeah, thank you as always, Director Gonzer, for those updates. I was real encouraged and excited to hear about the EPA award for Climate Champions. Glad to hear that project's going to continue to build. So congratulations on that. And the Urban Forestry award is real exciting as well, and to work with the state on that. So encouraging, and congratulations on that. I did have one question that also relates to a agenda item coming up. I see that the Resilience Office is trying to fill a number of positions from the last meeting notes. Can you remind us what is the office's current capacity in the topic of urban heat? Do you have somebody dedicated to that topic? Are you seeking somebody at this time?
So within the Climate Adaptation Program, more formally known as the Coastal Water Program, led by Alex Yee, we have 4 team members currently, and one specifically works on flood risk reduction. Chase McDaniel, he's the flood resilience specialist. We have Haley Campbell, who's the climate adaptation specialist, who's really the project lead for our 2 heat initiatives, which I believe we've provided at least brief awareness in the past, and we'd be happy to provide updates. One is more about heat management, right? Through time, we know it's getting, heat mitigation. Through time, we know it's getting hotter, and the urban heat guidance that you are all working on really touch both on heat mitigation and heat management. Management being like in the moment, we know that we can have a really severe event through high heat, and that's a different solution set than mitigating increasing temperatures through time. So Haley Campbell, we're through those two projects and any of the outcomes of the guidance document in combination with our engagements with DPR on trees and everything in between, that's where we're really building out the heat resilience capacity.
Okay, thank you for that reminder. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and then I said there were 4 people. The 4th individual, Claire Rossi de Leon, is actually a Sea Grant GRA Fellow, Climate Adaptation GRA Fellow, and we're excited for just about almost 2 more years of support through that program on that particular topic. She's one of 2 GRA Fellows that we have.
Right, thank you.
Great. Commissioner Keener?
Thanks. And thank you for that update, Director Gonser. A lot of really well-funded and exciting, progressive initiatives coming up. So that's always exciting to hear. I had a question about the FEMA program, a follow-up question about the flood insurance outreach, I believe you said. So it's specifically around outreach about educating homeowners about flood insurance. Is that what it is?
Yeah, it's a little 2-parter. One, to get better awareness on the who, where, and how of flood insurance policies. We have some interesting data, anonymized data, that actually shows a decrease in several thousand policies over the last couple of years. And we're unawares on the why. It might be, flood insurance is only required, federal flood insurance is only required if you have a federally backed mortgage. It might be that those that don't have mortgages were turned off because it's an expense and they hadn't been impacted, or rates have been changing. And that's one of the reasons we're interested in maintaining our community rating system standing to help get a credit back on flood insurance premiums annually. So there's a research component, collecting the data, but then also communications materials that will be prepared for us and that will support our continued community flood education on an annual basis.
Great. Now that's really interesting. And is that work?
It kind of just kicked off officially maybe last week, so we'd be happy to come forward to talk more about that work stream as well.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about it eventually. Is Chase McDaniel, your flood resilience person, leading that work?
He's part of the team under Sarah Harris, who's the hazard mitigation program manager.
Great. Thank you.
I'll hold my questions for now and want to open it up to the public for any comments and testimony from the public. In particular, I'd like to ask Nancy McPherson from DHHL to kind of come on to Zoom and repeat the information she dropped in the chat so that it can be captured in our recording.
You caught me with my mouth full, Rosie. Okay, I just attended informational webinar, but there's another one that's going to be on December 13th. So if you go to the link that Matt put in the chat, there's a whole bunch of information. There's actually slides you can download. It's like $25 million. There's a lot of money. And there's a lot of different ways to access it. And they do talk about what defines a Native Hawaiian organization and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's very exciting. And it's really meant to incorporate traditional ecological knowledge, cultural practices, etc. So I really like how they have designed this, and thank you for participating, whoever participated and giving them feedback as they were scoping it and putting this together, because it shows it's very culturally appropriate. So
Thank you, Nancy. Opening it up for the public to see if there's any comments or additional testimony with regard to the information that Director Gonzer provided.
Yes, this is Howard Wigg, Hawaii State Energy Office. I sit on committees of the Cool Roof Rating Council and the Cool Wall Rating Council, and a subset of both is the urban heat island effect. So I would appreciate being added to that list so that maybe we can make a contribution in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Anyone else from the public or in our Zoom audience, please feel free to come off of mute. Or if there are a number of you, you can just raise your hand and then we'll recognize you in order. Okay, seeing none, I will just kind of end this portion of our agenda point with just saying that I really appreciate, as always, all the work that OCCSR does. And I in particular enjoyed my experience going out to the Waianae Makeke, and I hope that we get to follow up on some of the relationships that we built. In particular, we were invited to the Kupuna Council, and I really am looking forward to attending and continuing to build those relationships. What I found was that the interactions were really, really authentic. Really, people were very, very interested, and I want to see more of that. I'm really, really excited for that. Mahalo. Can I get a clarification from Resilient Oahu that says public testimony in person? Oh, is there someone in person who would like to give public testimony? Yes. Okay. Is it germane to this item, or otherwise we can have them provide testimony at agenda item number 9, which is communications and correspondence from the public?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
We have somebody in person and they will testify later in the meeting.
Great, perfect. Please remind me if I forget, but I'm going to make a note of it in my process agenda. So mahalo. At this time, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is a presentation on the 5th National Climate Assessment. We're going to have Commissioner Keener present on that, and I'm very excited to hear everything that she is going to be sharing with us today.
Thanks, Rosie, and thanks everyone. So this is going to be a shorter overview of the chapter. I'm not getting too into the weeds on all of the findings today. This will just be an introduction for everybody about it coming out and happening. So let me. Okay, hold on. I would think this would get easier. Share screen. All right, are you seeing the title slide there?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, thanks all. So as you may have seen, over the last few weeks, there has been some commotion over the release of the 5th U.S. National Climate Assessment, which is required through federal law to occur approximately every 4 years, and is, I like to describe it as kind of a national version of the IPCC. So whereas the IPCC reports focus on global trends and climate variables, projections, and global impacts, the National Climate Assessment really takes it down to a national and regional level, and over that a sectoral level as well, to localize a lot of the impacts and results of climate change that we're experiencing now and will in the future in the different regions and sectors of the US. So as you can see from this title slide, we are at the chapter 30 in this just released National Climate Assessment, which the White House and the US Global Change Research Program released recently. There were 16 authors on the chapter. These ranged from federal authors to academic authors to authors from nonprofit organizations. So there's a wide variety of people, and they stretched across the region. So not just from Hawaii, but also from Guam, from Palau, people with expertise all across the entire region. So we were really happy, and we've been working on this for over 2 years. So it's been a very long process. I'd also like to acknowledge that Chair Allegado and Commissioner Romine contributed as technical contributors to the chapter, excuse me. So we had several dozen technical contributors that also participated in defining the key messages and the key threats and adaptation options for the region. So this is a reminder of what our area includes. It's not just Hawaii. So our Chapter 30 region is Hawaii and the US affiliated Pacific Islands, which includes Hawaii, American Samoa, Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas, the Federated States of Micronesia, Guam, the Pacific Remote Islands, the Republic of the Marshall Islands, and the Republic of Palau. So again, those include US territories, US freely associated states, and the Pacific Remote Islands. And I'll keep on throwing this, this link up there for you, which is for the chapter throughout there, but I'll also put it in the chat box at the end of this presentation, so you can go and check out the chapter as well. So since the chapter is regional in nature, there are a lot of findings that we've tried to both generalize across the region and for the specific islands and nations that are encompassed in there. So as everybody knows, the region is extremely vast and diverse. There are over 2,000 islands across the territory that we're covering in the chapter. It's home to a diverse group of island peoples. Our region is experiencing lots of different climate changes, some of which are shown here in this figure. And Director Gonser, I saw in your background that you had the NCA4 version of this figure behind you in the room. So you guys might want to print out the new and improved one from NCA5 to stay current on kind of improvement of this indicators and impacts figure. So the same kinds of findings as we talk about very commonly in the commission meeting: rainfall patterns are shifting, temperatures and sea levels are rising, and the ocean is becoming more acidic. We have seen throughout the region that climate change is exacerbating inequities across the region and threatening many of the things that we care about here and across the Pacific Islands, including our unique island ecosystems, cultural resources, human health, livelihoods, built environment, and access to clean water and healthy food. One of the findings that echoes through the different key messages in the chapter is that there are a lot of adaptation actions that are already happening on the ground, and actions that center local and indigenous knowledge can improve resilience and build community, which increases resilience as well. So Chapter 30 had 5 key messages, and these were decided on through a lot of work with different stakeholders across the Pacific region, people coming in to speak to our author teams. We had workshops, we had surveys. So we tried to keep this really, really open on the places where we would focus. So our key messages, number 1 was that climate change impairs access to healthy food and water. That means saltwater intrusion, drought, increased flooding and pollution, and degradation of nearshore fisheries threaten food and water resources. That figure in the top right highlights how programs aimed at supporting traditional crops, such as taro varieties that are salt tolerant, are valuable for adapting to climate change and strengthening local food security. Key message 2 is that climate change undermines human health, with impacts ranging from declining fisheries impacting nutrition to hot weather increasing heat-related illness. Efforts that build on community strength and center local Indigenous knowledge can boost resilience. I'd also like to highlight here that this is the first time that climate impacts on human health have made it into our regional chapter. So there has been a lot of new work, programs, academic publications across Hawaii and the Pacific region that focus not only on climate change impacts on physical human health, but also mental health, and that's reflected in the chapter as well. Key message 3, rising sea levels are increasing the frequency and severity of coastal flooding events, as you can see in that middle image on the right. And they threaten infrastructure and local economies, also exacerbating inequities. However, we also highlight that islands are taking action. For example, Hawaii established forward-looking setbacks and have required sea level rise hazards to be disclosed in real estate transaction, among other governance. And that's all featured in that section. Key message 4 is that climate change is threatening native ecosystems. For example, we've seen alarming declines in endemic forest birds and increasing wildfire risks. The figure on the bottom right, which I'll show close up in a minute, shows how the annual percentage of total land burned for 7 Pacific islands is equivalent to or greater than the percent area burned for Western US states. To avoid future catastrophes like what we experienced in Maui this summer, there are many management actions we can use to reduce fire risk through reducing fire fuels and educating the public about fire risk. Key message 5 is about Indigenous knowledge systems. Indigenous people and their knowledge systems are central to the resilience of island communities amidst the changing climate. Indigenous peoples are identifying and quantifying potential loss and migration of critical resources and expanding the cultivation of traditional food crops on high islands to increase food security and resilience. So I am going to show several of the figures just to give you a taste of the kind of information that is encompassed in the chapter. So this might look familiar to a lot of the CCSR folks on the call and others who may have even participated in this community heat assessment. So this was a community heat assessment done in 2019, August 31st, showing the afternoon heat index and hotspots for the island of Oahu. And so on this day, the high temperature tied the hottest ever recorded for Honolulu. So good or bad timing there. And we know that climate change is increasing the frequency, intensity, and duration of heat extremes, putting individuals and communities at risk. And so the fact that we elevated this data to the national level, and it's reflected in the chapter, I think really shows both the great work of CCSR, the relevance of this study, and the continuing relevance of both government and communities needing to work together on mitigating and adapting to heat on the island and across the state. Here's that figure that I mentioned earlier about the wildfire area burned in the Pacific Islands compared to the Western US. So again, that annual percentage of total land area burned for 7 Pacific Islands is equivalent to or greater than the percent area which is burned for the Western US states, which, you know, of course, the islands are much smaller, but it's still quite alarming to know that about those percentages that are burned annually. And you can see some especially alarming statistics in the these figures for Rota and Guam, for example, looking at that percentage area burned annually. And again, this comes back to, you know, trends in precipitation, rising temperatures, and land management, as we all know and have experienced. Just some additional highlights. I really do recommend that everybody go check out the chapter, look at the findings, and look at the other chapters as well. So all of the regions have their own findings. But this is really one of, we see so many climate assessments come out with a lot of, what the media calls the same doom and gloom projections of all the different impacts. But this is really the first national climate assessment, and maybe one of the first assessment reports that really focuses on adaptation bright spots and the fact that we have a lot of the answers to move forward and fix a lot of these impacts and address them both equitably and meaningfully going forward. It's all about implementation at this point and the will to have that implementation. So it's not maybe as negative of an assessment as you might be expecting. There are a lot of places where we can act. Additional highlights from our chapter. At higher global warming levels, we will experience more severe impacts. So anything we can do to reduce those ultimate warming levels are going to reduce the ultimate severity of those impacts and are always worth doing. The cascading impacts on people and ecosystems are disproportionate to our region's emissions. So we are seeing compounding and cascading impacts from these changes already that are greater than is proportional to our greenhouse gas emissions historically. Another highlight is our recognition of shared challenges and data inequities with the U.S. Caribbean region. So one of the things that happened in the National Climate Assessment this year was there was improved representation of non-contiguous areas across the U.S. So Alaska, the Caribbean, and the Pacific Islands. We were featured, Hawaii and the region was featured in more of the sectoral chapters. However, it was still not across the board. There's still a lot of maps that leave us out, and there's still room for improvement. And finally, actions are already underway, as I mentioned, but need to be scaled up and accelerated. Opportunities exist for place-based adaptation and mitigation, informed by Indigenous knowledge systems, and we need to try and center that in both our adaptation currently and in the future. So finally, I'll give you that link again and I'll throw it in the chat. And here's the full citation, but thank you. And we're going to have a full webinar for in-depth findings of the chapter and how they relate to the NCA 5 in the whole. However, they're doing that at the national level and they're going through the chapters one by one. So it's going to take a little bit to get to chapter 30. And our webinar will be held in February, which I will put in the chat as well for everybody to sign up if they're interested. And just as a heads up, the USGCRP team from Washington, D.C. will be out probably at the end of March to hold an in-person workshop with public and authors who are interested in engaging more about the chapter. And when that information is finalized in public, I'll share that here as well. And that's it. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks so much, Commissioner Keener. We'll open up for comments, starting with the commissioners. Commissioner Otsuka.
Yes. Hi. What a cool paper you folks worked on. Vicki, I don't know if this is quite in the realm of this paper, but I was just wondering if you touched on sort of the climate impacts on cultural resources in this document, or if that's not really in the gist of what you folks had to focus on.
Key message 5 focuses around cultural impacts specifically. However, we tried really hard to weave it through all of the key messages. So, some of the comments early on when our chapter was in review were, about how, about the echoing of the cultural resource and Indigenous knowledge impacts all throughout the chapter. And let me just throw the link directly in the chat for people right now.
That's all for me, Chair Allegado.
Thanks so much, Commissioner Romine.
No questions at this time, but I do want to thank Victoria for the presentation and thank the whole author team for all their hard work on this really critical, vital information and resource for Hawaii and our country. Look forward to going through it in more detail again, and have registered for some of the upcoming webinars and looking forward to the March event. So thank you all very much.
Thanks, Brad, and thanks for your contributions. I also forgot to mention, I'm going to put one more thing in there that, so this is interesting as well. This has been a very technical report in the past. And one of the ways they kind of tried to broaden the impact besides, you know, the increased community involvement and discussion of adaptation actions across the report is that there is an entire section you'll see on the page devoted to art and climate. And what that is there was a competition and they solicited artistic submissions around climate change and for the different regions and sectors to be featured in the report. So we do have every chapter has its own original art piece as a header, and a lot of the photographs and visual art submissions for each chapter are reflected through the document.
Thank you, Vicky. Thank you, Brad. Just wanted to let the audience know I had to switch to my phone. My computer is experiencing some battery difficulties, so if I am unable to see some aspects of the chat, I've asked Vice Chair Keener to help facilitate the meeting as we move forward, as I try and figure out my technical difficulties. Do want to open it up to comments, questions, and testimony from the public on this specific aspect. I see there is one question in the chat. I don't know if Vicky, you want to address that directly or ask the person to come off of mute and re-ask. Up to you.
I can respond to the question in first as written, and then I can invite Jay to unmute and follow up. So in the chat, the question is, as we have known for too long, or we have known for too long that we face not the hows of response, but a question of will. Where do you see the will today here at home? And of course, that is always the question, as you say, Jay. But, you know, I think that there is a lot of will at both the local and regional level, and that is reflected not in just the funding initiatives that we're seeing come down from both the federal level to, you know, state and local scales. The largest federal investments in climate change adaptation that we have ever seen, and much needed. But, you know, just how Matt spoke today as we opened the meeting about all of the different initiatives that are in many cases federally funded, filtering down to the state and local scale of how to implement and adapt to a lot of these impacts. So I think there is, you know, maybe for the first time, you know, a great deal of political will at different scales, and that is resulting in fiscal investments to adaptation and mitigation. At the same time, you know, the climate negotiations that are going on right now are in Dubai, and there's representation from fossil fuel companies that are running that meeting. So, you know, the globally and nationally, the political will question is still, you know, very much controversial. I guess, yeah, the will today here at home, is great, and we see a lot of things going on from the government down to the community scale, and new partnerships with different community-based organizations and community members that I think are advancing the conversation in meaningful ways. But let me pass it off to Brad, who I see has his hand up, and then we can go back to you, Jay, if you have a follow-up question.
Thanks, Victoria. I just wanted to add to everything you said, a reminder that the Commission's climate change brief that was recently completed also includes sections on progress that has been made at the local scale here with each of the climate change indicators and impacts that we discuss in that brief. So definitely refer folks back to that for summary information on the good work that's being done and the progress that's being made locally here too.
Thanks, Brad. And I will, in terms of local interest, I'll also say that I was recently invited to give some updates on similar findings from both our climate brief and from the National Climate Assessment chapter at the state legislature in January. So I think there will be a climate discussion there that day. So, there is interest and there is will and there is money. It's just, is it enough and is it fast enough? But I can pass it back to you, Jay, if you have any follow-ups.
Thanks, Vicky. Just a quick follow-up, and my follow-up is there is absolutely all of the political will and the institutional will. What are people seeing in the popular will? I'm seeing a very mixed bag. And full disclosure, I am a journalist. I've just come from a reporting trip following up my work reporting on the Camp Fire 5 years ago. And I'm seeing the beginnings of what I've been following in Paradise here, subsequent to Lahaina and Kula. And I'm wondering if in the larger scheme of things, there is a program to kind of push involvement at the public level after these terrible fires. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that follow-up, Jay. And you're right that, in the public opinion I've seen as well is rather mixed lately. There was, I believe it was released in September or maybe October. It was a Pew study that was looking at it was nationwide, and it was looking at shares of Americans that say climate scientists understand key aspects of climate change very well, and it was longitudinal. So it was done in 2016, 2021, and 2023, and they broke that down by different demographics. In 2023, that has the proportion of people who don't think that climate scientists understand climate change or the ways to adapt and mitigate the impacts is growing. So, it's not a great result. I'll see if I can find that Pew study, but, I think locally and regionally in the Pacific Islands, the political will is strong at the community level. Matt?
Thank you, Vice Chair, and thank you for the question. Just wanted to make a point as it relates to the draft climate adaptation strategy. The way it is structured and why it is structured as such is directly in response to strong community interest and desire, recognizing that there's a lot government must do and needs to do, but residents and organizations are hungry to be part of the solutions. And both the NCA and the draft climate Ready Oahu document elevate and highlight actions, quote unquote, that you can take. And also locally, we're really trying to elevate and recognize that there's so much place-based community leadership that isn't spoken about in terms of climate change adaptation, but is if there's cultural and environmental restoration going on, perpetuating practices and resources. Not only does that make us more socially connected to engage in these difficult discussions, but it literally makes the ecological systems more robust so that they can actually buffer us against some of the changes in climate and give us a fighting chance because we're giving them a fighting chance. So we tried to make sure to listen, elevate, recognize that, and weave it in together. It doesn't, it doesn't mean we have all the answers and we don't have all the resources and partnerships aligned, but we think it's very important to put a pin on it and say it very publicly and openly in a city-facing document like this, and continue to find ways to be strong partners with community members while also doing the things that we know are important to keep people safe into the future. So I just dropped the link in case people are hankering for final comments through the end of today, or just to keep informed as it progresses as well.
Yeah, if I may add on, I think a really important point that Matt brings up, and I want to kind of emphasize even more, is the fact that our local community cultural organizations in their work of biocultural restoration, in fact, are doing the work of climate resilience and climate adaptation. And I think recognizing that, as Matt has said, is the realization, is the manifestation of what a lot of higher level documents are encouraging us to do globally, which is to utilize Indigenous knowledge. And I think we're doing that here in Hawaii in a very realistic way. We might not call ourselves climate scientists or, climate activists, but I think in supporting and perpetuating cultural practices, Indigenous resource management, it has been recognized in other kind of documents, and I'm not able to drop the link here, that in fact, right, even though Indigenous peoples make up only 5% of the population and are stewarding 25% of the lands and waters, that they are protecting 80% of the world's global biodiversity. And I think what we're saying here is that in Hawaii, we see that intersection and we lean into it.
Thanks, Rosie.
Sorry. Yeah.
Are there other questions from the public? And once I find that link to the February webinar, I'll drop it in the chat as well.
Mahalo. Any other comments from the public? Okay. Vicky, you don't see any either, do you? Or okay. Nope. Great. Seeing none, we're going to move on to our next agenda item, which is discussion on the urban heat guidance document that's been in development for a bit of a time now. The commissioners who are on point with that are Commissioner Otsuka and Commissioner Romine. So I'd like to hand it over to them to discuss where we are at as far as incorporating the results of the online survey and any other demographic data that you guys were thinking about collecting.
Thank you, Chair. We're going to start, Commissioner Otsuka and I are going to start with a brief presentation, getting on some of the key highlights of the guidance document and some of the feedback we received in the process. We went through that, and then hope to then go into a question and answer session and even some live editing of the document as needed after that. So before I get started with that presentation, I'll do the first part of it. I'm going to hand it over to Kiana for the second part. I do want to note in the agenda, it says that a draft from May 12, 2022 was provided. A more recent draft was provided and is available online from November of this year. And that's the version we'll be talking about and working on. So with that, let me get my screen share going here. Bear with me for 1 second. Oops. I'm having a hard time finding the screen share bar above here. 1 second. Seems to have this. Okay, there we go. All right, can somebody tell me, are you seeing the presentation correctly?
Yes.
All right, good. Thank you for bearing with me. Okay, yeah, this is a brief presentation overview of the latest and hopefully near final draft of the urban heat guidance document from the Honolulu Climate Change Commission. A little just reminder of the purpose of the Honolulu Climate Change Commission and how this relates to our approach on this guidance document. We're tasked with gathering the latest science and information on climate change impacts of Hawaii, with a particular focus on Oahu. We advise the city offices and elected officials as they look to draft policy and engage in planning for future climate scenarios. So that's the kind of the focus we took in developing this guidance document. The purpose of this urban heat guidance is to provide a set of scientific findings and recommendations on managing heat stress and heat shocks, also known as heat waves, We work to identify impacted communities in light of global and regional climate projections, describe the physical nature of atmospheric and urban heat in Hawaii, and provide accounts of how other cities are managing their urban heat challenges. I want to thank and acknowledge all the folks that put hard work into this document. I'm not going to name them all here for time's sake, but I do want to, in particular, recognize Dr. McKenna Kaufman and Dr. Chip Fletcher, who put a lot of work into this document before their departure from the commission. So thank you to them. And thank you to all our reviewers that provided feedback on the draft, and we'll get back to some of the feedback that we received later in the presentation. But I do want to note that ultimately the content of this guidance document rests solely with the Honolulu Climate Change Commission. Brief overview of the contents of the document. We put the recommendations up front, along with a summary of our key findings. Then there's an introduction section, and we get into security concerns related to heat and human communities, the health and impact disparities of urban heat. And then we get into some of the localized effects, such as heat shock and heat waves and heat on Honolulu's urban communities. Then we get into some of the heat mitigation strategies that have been utilized elsewhere in other locations and are being utilized here in Hawaii, and then a series of appendices that go into more detail into some of the related climate change indicators and impacts and some of the approaches to addressing urban heat. I want to share a brief overview of some of the key findings from the report. Human activities, principally through emissions of greenhouse gases, have unequivocally caused global warming, with global surface air temperatures now reaching about 2 degrees Fahrenheit. Without a strengthening of policies, global warming of almost 6 degrees Fahrenheit is projected by 2100. Average air temperature, along with that, has risen by about 2 degrees Fahrenheit in Hawaii since the mid-1900s. Climate change is causing a rise in the global frequency and magnitude of extreme heat. Under current global emission reduction pledges, children born in 2020 will experience 7.5 times more heat waves, or 30 versus 4 heat waves on a global average basis. Heat waves are worsened by the urban heat island effect, is kind of described in the figure below here. Heat stress and heat shocks are climate and extreme weather related hazards for Honolulu here locally. And this can be exacerbated by changes in local winds. When we occasionally lose our trade winds during a heat event. Increasing sea surface temperatures and air temperatures are resulting in rising heat stress here. In 2019, an Oahu community heat assessment found many neighborhoods with afternoon heat indices between 100 degrees and 107 degrees Fahrenheit. And that relates back to that map that Victoria showed that also got featured in the National Climate Assessment. And here's a earlier version of that map from that urban heat survey. Urban heat waves are strongly associated with socioeconomic impacts. These complex heat exposure patterns highlight an urgent need for locally tailored adaptation and early warning systems within our communities. Extreme heat can trigger fatal heat exhaustion or heat stroke. Older adults, young children, people working in hot conditions, and people with chronic conditions face the highest risks. Heat waves are already a leading cause of weather-related deaths in the United States, killing more than 600 people each year. The experiences that we document in the report from other urban areas provide guidance on practices that are effective in mitigating heat stress and heat shocks, including things like using reflective surfaces, permeable surfaces, shade, heat-resilient planning, such as water infrastructure, and improved urban design and energy efficiency. For example, the use of more reflective surfaces in hot cities around the world could cancel the warming effect of between 44 and 57 billion metric tons of emitted carbon dioxide. For comparison, Our global energy-related CO2 emissions in 2022 was about 37 billion metric tons. Also, increasing the reflectance of land surfaces, such as by converting highly reflected roofs, could offset as much as 30% of greenhouse warming. So we have some tools to address this warming that we're facing. I do want to recognize that the city is taking important steps with regard to managing urban heat, including through the Oahu Resilience Strategy, its actions number 32 and 33 that relate to urban heat. Director Gonzer also mentioned Climate Ready Oahu draft climate adaptation strategy that is in develop and includes specific strategies and actions for addressing heat hazards. And we also provide more examples and detail in Table 1 of our urban heat guidance about some of the approaches that the city and county is taking towards addressing urban heat. Some of the key recommendations that come out of the findings in the report in our guidance document include that urban Oahu may experience intolerable levels of heat by mid-century, and action is needed now to begin to address those heat hazards. We should be creating, expanding our public education and outreach programs to increase heat awareness. A comprehensive plan for emergency heat response is needed. We should continue to collect more heat information to expand on the data that we have available already. We should further develop heat resilience building guidelines and codes, develop a cool streets and cool roofs walls program, and further use census data to identify underserved and low-income communities that are at risk of heat stress and shock. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Kiana to talk a little bit about some of the community input that we reached out on and received on the guidance document.
Sure, everybody, good morning. I'm Kiana Okuka. I helped to manage the stakeholder input with Dr. Romine. I'm just going to say a little bit more about our process as well as some of the comments we received through this process. So we identified over 50 diverse stakeholders that relate to urban heat. So these are groups like those working in and around like UH and the community colleges, community health centers, those in sort of the built environment, those folks in transportation. So we had a nice diverse list of stakeholders. We asked them to provide us feedback via survey. We gave them 2 weeks to respond. The questions in the survey related to the document. So again, we looked for feedback on the sections related to global security concerns, human health. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Oh. Environmental health, equity, community resources, priority strategies, existing strategies to mitigate heat, concerns related to increased energy use with increased AC use, as well as feedback on our general heat mitigation strategies. So in total, we received 8 responses. All the organizations were statewide. That's the demographic data we collected. We asked what zip code the folks who responded represent. Next slide, Brad, please. And I'll walk you through some of the comments we received sort of by section. These aren't all the comments, we're just sort of highlighting some of the major comments. So with regards to human health, we received a comment related to leveraging the existing roof and exterior wall solar reflectance provisions in our new ordinance, as well as developing thermal safety standards. So thinking about standardizing at what point human health is at risk. Next slide, please. Relating to environmental health, we received comments about emphasizing more of our permaculture practices and our One Water practices, as well as thinking about how our water demand will change given not only increased heat, but also thinking about how we may use water features to help with heat mitigation. Next slide, please. With regard to equity, we received a few comments asking us to think about developing programs to support more installations of cool roofs and cool exterior wall materials in low-income neighborhoods. So thinking about how do we serve folks in public housing, as well as provide incentives or rebates for those sorts of materials and installation of those materials. And we also received a comment asking us to think about whether Title I schools disproportionately experience urban heat. And if they do, for us to prioritize heat mitigation strategies at and near those schools, especially those without AC. And then looking at our near-term policy priorities, we received quite a few comments here. We received several asking us to think about requiring heat resilient planning. So whether that be more green infrastructure, blue infrastructure, more heat resilient building codes, things of that nature, as well as some transportation related policy priorities, particularly prioritizing speed at bus stops. Next slide, please. And then looking at increased energy and AC use, we received a few comments. The first, someone provided a great resource on more research and data with regard to the specific topic. So we included some information in the revised document, as well as asking us to elaborate more on how passive cooling strategies are impactful and help us reduce AC use. Next slide, please. And then we asked folks for what strategies were missing. Received quite a few comments here, again, summarizing some of the ones we heard. So asking us for more discussion and more discussion and policies on landscape-led design, more discussion on our tree count, more discussion on depaving, and then the last comment we received was with regard to looking at hydration stations, shade at bus stops, and structures along pedestrian and bicycle routes, and trying to think about how we incorporate shade as an important part of our complete streets policy. Next slide.
That concludes the presentation.
Oh, that's the last one.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brad. Sorry.
No problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I zoomed through that really quickly. So if folks have questions, happy to answer. I didn't want to keep us too long in this particular section, but thank you again to those who commented. We really appreciate it.
Chair, I will defer to you how you'd like to handle the process here, but you know, if you'd like, I think we can certainly open up to some questions on the presentation if there are from the commission and then the public. We will have more chance for dialogue, direct input if as we get into the document editing as well.
I would say that if this is redundant with, if there's overlap between this and the actual document, I would like to proceed to the document. I have high hopes that we might be able to adopt this today, so I'd like to proceed onto that if possible.
Okay. Yes, 1 second. I will pull up the document then. Sorry. There we go. Okay, let me pull up the Word document then. Okay, hopefully we all are seeing the Word version of the latest urban heat guidance document. You know, screen share.
Yep, looks good, Brad.
Okay. Kiana, you're gonna kind of help facilitate any of the discussion,
Yep.
right? I will try to keep up with editing in the doc.
Yeah. Chair Legato, do you want me to just ask commissioners if they have comments first and then we open it to public, or you want to handle that?
Yes. No, I
Okay.
would like you folks to facilitate that. So yeah, if
Okay.
you can go through it, and then what I would say is if you can point out any substantive changes that you've made since I think it's the May draft, that would be helpful. And then
Okay.
as you're scrolling down, you can take any comments from I guess it would be myself and Vicky. I don't have any substantive changes to this, but I think it would be helpful for us to know where the stakeholder feedback or the, the survey was incorporated, where that information is.
So a couple of things, and Brad, please chime in. The comments were sort of meant to, or the comment section of the presentation meant to sort of address some kind of major changes we made. And then two, Brad, do you think it's better? I know we decided on the accepted changes. Is it easier for us to go through the track change document instead?
Yeah, I can switch over to that if folks
Okay.
care if you'd appreciate seeing the existing track changes from the last version. We have a version of that as well. It's a little busier, messier, of course, but I think we could show that also.
Yes, this is our process.
Okay.
Give me a
I'm not
moment.
scared. Let's just jump in. Let's take a look-see.
Okay. I think I saw Director Gonzer's hand up maybe in the meantime, maybe not. Okay.
Nope, that was a mistake.
Okay. All right. Give me a moment while I pull up that other version.
And if you can't find it, Brad, let me know. I can send it over to you.
Okay. I think I have it pretty handy here. Okay, this is, you should be seeing the track changes version now. I'll warn you, there are some formatting issues with this version as well. I hope that doesn't distract from this process. I will note before we get into this, there are some updates that we noticed that we need to make in regards to formatting, but also the table of contents needs to be updated to reflect some minor changes we made to the headings and the order of sections. We removed this summary section and integrated it into the findings section, which is now called summary of findings. So this does need to be updated in the final version, but is non-substantive, so we're okay there.
Maybe, Brad, we can start with the findings because we made quite a bit of changes there, reflecting the comments with everyone. Yes. So looking at recommendation number 4, and these are all responses to comments we received. Again, the thermal safety standards suggestion, as well as looking at the impacts on our water demand with regard to increased heat, as well as heat mitigation strategies. So that's for F and G. And anybody, please feel free to stop me as I go along. Looking at 5C, that was also in response to a comment suggestion for us to emphasize passive cooling and incentivize it in our building design and building codes. And retrofits, I'm sorry, retrofits was an important piece. Looking at 5F, leveraging the existing ordinance, or the ordinance that was just passed for our cool roofs and exterior wall solar reflectance building materials. Also, in response to a comment we received, looking at 6, in response to the deep paving comment, we added a comment about deep paving here. 60, maximizing installation of PV over parking lots to help mitigate heat. Talking more about shaded structures in response to comments we received. We did get quite a bit of comments on the city's One Water policy, so we added a reference here to more blue infrastructure. And looking at one of the suggestions was appointing and hiring a dedicated person to work on urban heat. That's F. G is engaging it with community, in particular our youth, on urban heat resilience planning. And H is looking at developing financial incentives for installation of cool surface methods, again, in response to comments we received. Looking at 7, this is the data-focused recommendation. In response, again, to comments, is the analyzing whether Title I schools are impacted or disproportionately impacted by urban heat. And C, looking to establish more or establish rebate programs to support the installation of cool roofs and cool exterior wall materials in our low-income neighborhoods and public housing.
So I think that's it for
the big ones, right?
Yeah. Do we want to pause there?
Yeah.
For that section?
I think that'd be a good time to pause. Matt, did you want to add anything?
There's just a point of order on the agenda, and this may have been the office's mistake. Just noting first that the referenced agenda item speaks about the older version. However, if you click the link, it actually is this version, the most recent version. So the public has had access to this November 2023 version. But the agenda item says for discussion. So perhaps there was a misunderstanding on the commission's hopes to go towards voting and adoption today. So maybe one recommendation is just to continue to proceed with the discussion, continue to proceed with the collection of the feedback. It affords time for some of those editing, formatting versions that Dr. Roman had mentioned, so that we have the most next right version for swift adoption at a subsequent meeting. I think that would just ensure appropriate public communication and awareness on what is being conducted today, Chair.
That sounds great, Matt. Thank you. So yeah, let's continue to pretty much like finalize everything, but for voting, we'll definitely agendize adoption at the next meeting, right? So we can continue to look at these changes and discuss, take comments from the public. Does that sound good? Gonzer? Dr. Gonzer?
Yes, that works procedurally. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay. Yeah, so proceed, Kiana and Brad, let's finish this up and see if there's, and then take comments from the public.
Rosie, can we pause for comments now, just the recommendation section? Is that okay?
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay. Dr. Keener, did you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment mostly that after I read through this version, I was really impressed with the specifically the recommendation section, that it has gotten so much more specific. I mean, this is out of my expertise with the specific policies, but I think that the stakeholder outreach did do a really good job in getting a lot of more specific recommendations under each kind of broader numbered recommendation. So yeah, that's it from me on the recommendation section.
Great, thank you. Good morning, Dan. Do you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I do. Dan Donnell with Trees for Honolulu's Future, and I have to say this is an excellent report. Outreach was outstanding, so thank you for that. I do realize the commission is to advise the city in policy way. My comment is only on this recommendations section, which is just, again, so to the point. I like the specificity. Where I kind of would hope we get a little bit more is like, who is going to do it? The city always seems a little vague in sense of that. So that's my main concern. And there's opportunity. There's nonprofits. There's city parts of the city that there are so many people who want to have this done. So I don't know if that's appropriate here or not, but I would just worry it goes on the shelf, and that's not where this needs to go. This needs to go to the top of the pile. Thank you.
Christina, do you have a response, question, or comment?
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Dan. And thank you both for, Kiana and Brad for your work on this as well. And for that comment, Dan, and I hope that CCSR would agree with this as well, that a lot of these guidance documents that we produce, we have no control over policy in this commission, just guidance. But what we hope to do is provide recommendations with a lot of really good science and citations and work with stakeholders to provide, a reference. So the hope for a lot of these is that the city and partners of the city can take this peer-reviewed document of recommendations and use it to apply for funding from, for federal funding, just coming with a very a strong set of peer-reviewed recommendations and actions that will then justify support for funding. So in that case, like taking, we could add something to all of our guidance documents of, who should do this, but we have no say in over that and that. And we really just hope that people take this information and use it to support the work that they want to do or the partnerships they want to create in implementing these things.
Thank you, Dr. Keener. Matt, I guess question to you sort of as a follow-up to Dr. Keener's comment as well as Dan's comment. So once the guidance document is adopted, your office sort of helps develop these other sort of plans, like the Climate Ready Oahu, and it's sort of those documents to help to identify like not point of contact, but which agency or department is in charge of sort of which strategies. Is that kind of helping address Dan's question that it's sort of not in your office's hands, but your office sort of helps to collaborate and coordinate and identify those folks who are in charge of each of the strategies?
So as Dr. Romine presented in the beginning, the commission's charge, right? But also our office's charge is to coordinate actions and policy across city agencies in support of that. So I think it's an appropriate reference of, as done with all of the past guidance documents that the commission recommends that the city and county of Honolulu, et cetera. And procedurally, things that happen after the adoption of any guidance document, there's the formal transmission to city council. We've hosted briefings with internal sub-cabinet programs that are relevant to that subject matter. We've had briefings at city council. Mr. Donnell also serves on the city's mayor's arborist advisory council, right? So there's many avenues for further extending and building the coalitions. I don't see a need for naming specific departments or naming specific partners, but that's not to say that those are unimportant aspects of taking the next steps. We just take the recommendations, and the more that are advocating for coalitions in action, that's really the function and role that the commission provides.
Great, thank you. Any other questions or comments from either commissioners or the public? I'm just looking for hands in the chat. Oh, Rosie, go ahead.
Yeah, I also wanted to echo how impressed I am with the development and evolution of this document. I know it's been cooking for a while, and I really appreciate, we've been around for a number of years, and through that we've been honing in on our processes of how we put documents together. And I think that we took the time to do this one and get stakeholder and rights holder feedback, and it was the right thing to do. And so I think this is a testament to really developing these strong processes of including the public in the feedback, and as well as expert content matter areas. And I think that this speaks to a really strong document, and looking forward to continuing this process. So thank you to both of you for taking this on. I know you didn't start the document, but I really want to thank you for helping with its completion, as well as other staff that you have had and interns helping out with this document.
Thank you, Rosie. I think we mentioned this very briefly at the last meeting, but one of the other comments that wasn't specific to the urban heat guidance document, I think more specific to the process. And I think we talked about potentially agendizing this in the future. There were a couple of suggestions from folks that stakeholder feedback be earlier in the process and or both, sort of before and after. So something for us to think about when we move forward for future documents. Rosie, your hand's still up. Did you want to add anything else?
No, I'm just lowering it now.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to continue or just proceed, carry on.
Okay, I don't see any other comments or questions. Feel free to raise your hand or add something in the chat. I'll be monitoring. Brad, do you want to keep moving down the document? I think we're okay for recommendations for now.
Oh yeah, should we move to the summary of findings at this point?
I think so. So the major change we made is, you'll see number 3B. Actually that one's not a particularly major change, but adding a little bit more detail from this particular study. We can keep going down. Let me see what else changes we made in response to members of the public. In response to a comment we got from the Cool Roofs Council, they had made a note that they provide a lot of resources for government and members of the public. So we added that here in reference to the Cool Roofs Council comment. 5D. We added a section on ceiling fans in response to a comment we received in energy consumption. Was that it, Brad? I'm trying to remember. Or was there another
I'm not
section?
sure, it's getting a little messy with all the references at the bottom. Sorry, folks.
I know. The footnotes formatting got weird, so we have to reformat. Oh, there's a couple more stuff here. I'm trying to remember if there were any other major comments.
Yeah, I'm just slowly scrolling. I haven't seen any key findings. Here's some. Okay, this is where we moved, I think, the summary from the end of the document up into the front, the summary of findings here.
Yep, so this reflects the slide that Brad had up earlier in a little bit more detail.
How many point to slow down or stop? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we're getting to the end of that section now here.
I think that was the end of the section, right? Let's see.
Yes, it looks like.
Yeah, that's the end of that section. Any questions or comments from commissioners or members of the public?
No comments for me on that summary section.
None from me. And from the public, please raise your hand or just come off of mute. Again, I'm sorry, I'm on my phone. So Brad and Kiana, if you can see them, please feel free to facilitate that.
Yep,
Yeah, I'm gonna have to rely on you, Kiana. I'm not seeing all the windows either. Thanks.
Yep, I'm monitoring. I don't see any raised hands or any comments in the chat.
Okay.
I think we're okay to move forward, Brad.
Okay.
And I can maybe just flag for our audience where we made major changes.
Sure.
And we can stop at sort of maybe the end of the first major section for comments and questions. These are all, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I didn't mean to jump in ahead of you, but I just want to note this one change, that we completed the updated climate change brief in kind of the in the term while we were, the early draft of this was out before the climate change brief was done, and we wanted to kind of reconcile those, bring those documents together. So we did include reference to this climate change brief here and elsewhere. So I'll just keep scrolling slowly. Hopefully it's not going to make folks motion sick. Please stop me at any point if there's something you want to point out, Kiana.
Yep, these are all formatting issues being resolved so far, for the most part. Let me see, anything substantial? No, not yet. This is a formatting change, Brad. I'm trying to remember. I think this was a formatting change also.
I think so, yeah.
I think the only thing I added to this section was in response to Dr. Carroll's comment about emphasizing the response time for heat illness is most important, that if you can treat somebody in an ice bath within 30 minutes of them experiencing heat stroke symptoms, you can, it's like 100% survival rate. I think that's what was added here, or is it the next, sorry, I'm trying to remember if it's in the next section, maybe in the next paragraph. Oh yeah, there we go. That's the highlighted in orange is the comment from Dr. Carroll that we added that in there. These are all formatting changes. I think I might have accidentally left track changes on for this, sorry. Let me see if there's anything else in here.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any new content here. It was just moving thing. Okay.
I think so.
Looks like the same case still.
Yep.
Okay, this is
yeah, sorry, just formatting issues. I really thought I turned track changes off, sorry. Let's see. I think nothing substantial here.
Maybe I'll point out real quick though to the question earlier and just more detail on our slideshow presentation that this table might be helpful for folks to get it. It's an attempt to summarize in more detail what the city is doing around heat mitigation and adaptation efforts.
I think we added a resource at the bottom that wasn't there before too. I'm trying to remember. Oh, maybe not. Maybe that was another table. Okay, heat mitigation strategies. We added a couple of minor edits here in response to comments we got from the public. So we talked about shade at bus stops, more shading parking lots, and EV placement over parking lots. Talked about, again, the co-benefits of more One Water oriented policies in response to comments we received from the public. Maybe we can pause, Brad, at the end of this section since there's quite a bit more changes here.
Sure.
Reflective surfaces. Let's see, what are other? Again, in response to the parking lot and sort of depaving comments, we added another common method for lightening paved surfaces. More formatting changes. Okay, do you want to pause, Brad? And we can ask if there's comments and questions.
Sure. I'll go back up to the section.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. Any comments or questions from commissioners or the public on heat mitigation strategies for this first section? Seeing none. Rosie, are you unmuting? Did you want to share anything?
I just,
Okay.
no, I just was
Okay.
getting ready to move to the, move on, but yeah,
Okay.
continue.
Okay, sorry, Brad. Can you scroll back down?
Not seeing anything from our public attendees as well.
No, I don't see anything. Oh, sorry. We just missed the green infrastructure. Yeah, sorry.
There it
Yeah,
is.
yeah. The green infrastructure, just some formatting changes here. Ventilation and urban design. Some formatting changes up here. Keep scrolling down and see if there's anything else substantial we've changed. This was a comment, or this was a change you made in response to a comment under water features. That in addition to sort of the cooling features, that water features also provide benefits for irrigation, evaporative cooling, and fire safety. Anything else you changed in this section?
This is the summary section that was moved up to the summary of
Yeah.
findings.
Mm-hmm.
That brings us to the end of that section.
Okay. Any comments on the green infrastructure or water features, ventilation and urban design sections? Not too many changes other than formatting. Brad, I'm not seeing any raised hands or comments.
Okay.
Yeah.
I believe that brings us to the end of the main document, if I'm not.
Oh, yeah, I think so.
I don't know if we want to go through the appendices. Certainly, I think we could open up to comments and questions on the appendices, but maybe not a need to go over that.
I think the big changes in the appendices we made were in response to folks who provided us additional resources. So one of the appendices is a resource, and so we added several resources from the community.
Okay, yeah, I would just
stakeholder
go through
feedback.
that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
In addition to the comments, yeah, recognize everybody that provided the feedback. So thank you again to all of you.
With that, Rosie, I don't see any comments, or I guess I'll ask one more time, any comments or questions? Seeing none, Rosie, I'll turn it back to you.
Great, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to seeing like the super finalized version and looking to adopt in early 2024, maybe as like one of the first items on our agenda. So really great, really great. Thank you so much.
Rosie, can I interject really quickly?
Absolutely, yes.
Can I ask for a point of clarification? So at our next meeting, should Brad and I provide like the track change version or all the track changes accepted version? Like what would we be
For the
giving
next
to
meeting,
OCCSR?
in the next meeting, please turn in like the most finalized version, like accept these changes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then any presentation required, or we're okay to just say last time we met, we talked about this? I just want to know what Brad and I need to prepare for our next meeting.
We'll just, so prior to the agenda, prior to like, we have to post all the materials a week prior to the meeting. So please have the final version to OCCSR. And then at the actual meeting, we'll just bring it up and we'll ask if there's any final non-substantive changes. And if there are none at that time, we'll take a nomination to adopt the brief and then vote
Okay.
on it.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying. Appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you for asking. It's really good that you got, I know it was really uncomfortable, but you know, as we cycle off and get new commissioners, you guys, you'll go from being the new members to being the more senior members. And so I appreciate all the questions so that we can have like a clear process and keep moving it forward. So that's great. Okay, at this time, we're going to move on to the next agenda item, which is a discussion on the climate change and tourism brief. We presented the draft last time. We don't have any current updates. We're still working on incorporating the feedback that we got in the previous meeting. But what the two commissioners who are point on this is myself as well as Chair Keener. And what we wanted to actually just take feedback on now is we are in the process of developing our own stakeholder and feedback groups for outreach. And so we wanted to spend, I just really want to spend like 5 minutes, but then kind of open up as an invitation to say, please give us some, we're soliciting names of folks who we need to include in the feedback process. So who should we include? As stakeholder entities, we have a list, but we didn't want to, you know, bias ourselves. So we just want to open it up and ask, like, who do you think we need to include? Yeah, totally opening it up. I'll start with the commissioners for anything, and I'm taking notes. And so please, please bring it on. I'll start with Commissioner Romine.
Still regrouping after that last item, but I'll just stand by my comment last time about engaging our Center for Sustainable Tourism at Sea Grant. I think you've had some follow-up discussions with them in the meantime by email, so I'll leave it with that. Well, okay, I'll add to that. I think our process was successful with the email outreach and the survey that we designed to gather input. So you know, if at any point you want to talk about a process we went through with that, and I want to thank Robert and Kara for their help in putting together our survey instrument on that. That may be an approach you want to kind of borrow or build from as well. And I'm happy to talk more about the details of that at any point too, I think.
Yeah, I think that is a good idea. I think having different levels and ways to communicate would be great. So one way obviously would be like a survey, and maybe needing some kind of even in person. But I like the idea of potentially putting out a survey for sure.
Rosie, I'll just add, Brad and I also gave the stakeholders the opportunity, if they'd like to, meet with us 2-on-1. So we had one organization take us up on the opportunity to talk story. And that was really helpful for us, I think, Brad, just to hear more about what they do and understand where there are opportunities, not just for comments, but opportunities for us to collaborate in the future. So I thought that was helpful. If all 50 of them asked, I know it would have been a huge lift, but I did think our one meeting was really great. So I wanted to add that. I forgot to mention it in our presentation.
Thank you. Also, wanting to open it up now to the public for anyone who has suggestions on entities, organizations, communities that we, obviously tourism is a cross-cutting all across Hawaii Pai'aina issue and has multiple things, but I would ask that if you are coming up with a suggestion of entities that it does have as relevant and direct a relationship to the tourism economy as possible. So at this time, just opening it up to the public, please feel free to come off mute and or put it in the chat. And I literally am like writing stuff down with my pencil.
Oh, Rosie, can I provide at least one organization before we hop to the public?
Absolutely.
So thanks to this commission and the presentation from on sustainable tourism we did maybe 6 months ago, the Energy Office got some money to quantify tourism travel. So looking at specifically, or I guess rental cars as a proxy for tourism travel. So I definitely get in touch with the Energy Office, and Rosie, I can send you specific contacts because they're doing that study now and are recognize that's a big part of our transition to being carbon net negative by 2045. So looking at GHG emissions as well as vehicle miles traveled relative to our tourism and visitor industry.
That's great. Thank you. Again, totally open from the public to hear who else we should be talking to. As Vicky and I and OCCSR develop our kind of spreadsheet list, it would be really great to have any additional folks. Okay. Vicky, do you have any other comments?
I was just going to say that in terms of outreach and participation, I think that, you know, once we get our stakeholder list together, doing both a web survey, a smaller focus group for anyone interested from some of the major organizations, and as Kiana was mentioning, the kind of 2-on-1 organizational talk story sessions. I think that would be a good plan for us, and kind of follow the agenda of what we've been doing since the buildings guidance and the urban heat guidance.
Yep. That sounds good. Okay. Seeing that there is no additional kind of comments from the public, I wanted to move on to the next agenda item, which is discussion on commission briefs and guidance documents. This this agenda item was merely just to bring up, oh, thank you, Kiana, potential future briefs on our docket, as we are kind of, I don't like to take on too many, but I just wanted to put it out there and have a discussion. We are running a little tight on time because I know that we have testimony from the public, but perhaps we can just devote a few minutes into thinking about, for 2024, what are the guidance documents that we're interested in developing. For instance, we do have an urban heat document. Is fire risk something that we want to explicitly focus on? I know that there is ample coverage of that topic in other documents that that OCCSR has put out, but do we feel that that is something that we explicitly want to focus on? I'm agnostic to this, but that's just an example of potential future briefs. So at this time, I want to open it up to the commission specifically, and then open it up to the public to hear from you all, to hear what are additional kind of matters that we need to be focusing on as the Climate Change Commission. So I'll start with Commissioner Keener.
I was not prepared for this. So I hadn't thought of anything off the top of my head. I think I'm more, you know, with my cycling off in 2024, I was more concerned with getting the things done that I already have my name on, which will be the tourism brief and the military brief. So, I mean, in terms of things that I see a need for, you know, it might be interesting to think about guidance for how to, or best practices for equitably engaging with community-based organizations and communities in adaptation projects. And that would be kind of out of the wheelhouse of things we've done so far, which has been more technical in nature, but would build upon the equity guidance. And there is a lot more money coming through for specific partnership with community-based organizations. And I think a lot of organizations, academic, government, are struggling with how to best implement those and what the best practices for working with community organizations are sometimes.
That is something I have some expertise in, so that's good. I'm writing that down. Maybe you're not prepared, but I'm going to ask you anyway, Commissioner Romine, what areas you would like to do?
Well, you mentioned the fire risk document. I think that's certainly a pertinent topic and a top of everybody's mind. One general concern I have as we move into some of these other topics is I might be forgetting, forgive me if I am, but I think we need to be careful that we have the expertise to cover these topics on the commission. But now may also be a good time to identify key topics that we want to tackle and consider that in recruiting or nominating new commissioners that would have some more expertise in that topic. I'm not an expert in fire. Victoria, I think you might have a lot of background in that topic, but I certainly don't. So I think we should keep all that in mind as we're cycling through commissioners and the topics we come up with. As far as other topics, I'm real interested to hear from our attendees from the public, what they want to learn from us. And maybe we should, reach out to some of the other offices in the city too, to see where they could use more information. I'm always keen to help, particularly on the sea level rise topic. Of course, there was an update to the sea level rise guidance in July 2022, but perhaps there's more we can do about adaptation strategies for sea level rise, expanding on that guidance. Throw that out as just one idea.
Thank you, Brad. I will say that Vicky and I have been on some of these, and we're definitely not experts on a lot of things, insurance risk, but one of the things that we do is we utilize the commission meetings to bring on experts to kind of assist us in educating ourselves as well as the public. We really use it as an opportunity. Given that these appointments are 5 years, there will be topics for sure that we have to kind of cover and learn about that we are not going to be experts on because the need demands it. So I agree that it would be nice to have a really well-rounded commission, and it may not always be possible for some of the really pressing matters of our time. So we'll keep that in mind. Okay, Commissioner Otsuka, do you have any ideas?
Yeah, one of the comments comments that we got in the urban heat guidance stakeholder engagement is, where does food systems fit into urban heat? And Brad and I sort of decided we thought that warranted its own guidance document. Again, I'm not a food systems expert, but I'm happy to hear, Rosie, that one of the resources we can use is bring in folks to sort of support us and point us in the right direction. So whether it be our next commissioner is food systems focused, or whether someone on the commission takes that on, I think that's an important issue. The comment that we got, a couple comments about food systems, but the other one I thought was really interesting was on food systems related to farm labor and how that impacts our ability to provide food grown here for residents and other folks. So I think that's an interesting point. And then I think if we talk about this again at another commission meeting, I'd like to read through CCSR's ground transportation emissions and reductions plan and see if there's any PUCAs or additional support we can provide in terms of transportation, or ground transportation specifically, for my area of expertise.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Something that I feel like came up a lot during the tourism discussion last month that is I think too big is also possibly housing. So I'm just gonna put that I don't even know what that means, but it just came up a lot. It is certainly a Hawaii specific concern, trying to understand the intersection with climate. Maybe not, I don't know, but I think it's something that the public as well as ourselves will continue to confront. Yeah. Okay, so moving on, I want to open it up to the public.
Can I make one more comment, Rosie?
Yes,
And that's
absolutely.
maybe just asking Director Gonser specifically, are there things coming up with CCSR?
Thank you. That was also what I wanted to do. Yes.
that would make sense for the commission to focus on in terms of guidance that would help the office.
Thank you for that reminder.
And not a full description here, but I think there's certainly opportunity once we are able to pick our heads back up from being in the pages of Climate Ready Oahu. As I mentioned in the beginning, there's a lot of work that we know we don't yet know how to do yet. And there's support that will be needed and additional specific attention. There is one of the 12 strategies is all around climate smart ag, and there's federal direction and resources, but we're also not expert in some of that work, and we similarly want to learn across different risks and or sectors the kinds of things that we need to get a little bit more akamai about. That's just one example, but yes, we'll do our homework as well so that we can make requests of the commission.
Awesome. We'll continue to we'll re-agendize this in the future. Just wanted to kind of shoot some marbles around it. Any comments from the public before we move on to the next agenda item?
I don't know if you can see, Rosie, there's one raised hand from JMAT.
Okay. JMAT, please unmute yourself.
Hi, everybody. So I am a reporter, and I am in no means an expert on fire, but I have been covering wildfire in California and to some degree here, certainly on Maui, since the Camp Fire. And I've just returned from a long reporting trip in Paradise in which I spoke at length and with the district chief of Butte County and that large area, and went out on a prescribed burn with them. And I'm now speaking with CAL FIRE's Northern California director. And there's an integration that I mean, first and foremost, I have to say that we cannot here compare ourselves to CAL FIRE. We are not resourced in our wildland firefighting as they are, and we have not been dealing with it as long as they have been. But there is a connection at CAL FIRE that I may be missing here, but don't see as well here in Hawaii. That is the connection of our DLNR fire service to the organizations like the Climate Commission and all of the resources that UH may have to bring to bear in strategizing, in preparing, and all of that. So I guess it's not so much a question, but really just a hope that we can look to CAL FIRE, because for years I have been nothing but impressed with the way CAL FIRE does business, both on fires and relative to preparation and political engagement and public outreach. So that's it. I'm just coming in with a different perspective that because I'm of the reporting that I do, that I don't think is widely available here. So yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you, JMAT. Anybody else?
Go ahead,
Rosie or
Brad.
Brad? Sorry.
Yeah, just in response to that comment from JMatt, maybe it would be good to invite a speaker on the topic of wildfire and fire risk here. And for example, somebody from the Pacific Fire Exchange or one of those organizations that does exist here in Hawaii, and help us sort through, understand the informational needs there and where we might help on that particular topic.
That sounds good. Even if we don't, decide to act and write up a whole brief, we can certainly organize around topics that we feel that we need more education on, especially because these are recorded. They can serve as materials for the public, hopefully, who find it, which is great. Jimmy Weir, do you have questions?
Hi, thank you. And I'm new to this. I really appreciate everything I've learned today. I had two thoughts or questions that are half formulated, largely off of the discussion of preparing for extreme heat in Oahu. One of them is, has much thought been given to engaging homeowners in the forestation and greening process? Because I do some gardening and I do some farming. And it seems to me many people would like to do more to their yards if they knew what to do, had the resources. And there seems like there would be a potential program where you're incentivizing local homeowners to do things to their land that you actually wish to have done. It would, at some level, at its most refined, you'd be incentivizing local landowners to do what the city also recognizes as a need. Like the landowners' need may not be only climate driven, but it's interrelated with climate. And it seems like most, I'm literally looking at sitting in a hill in Kalihi, looking out and going, so much of this land is owned by, individuals who, if they could be encouraged and provided the resources that the heat index report would also like to encourage, it would be a nice meeting of two interests. And another one, just kind of very loose at this point, is I'm quite interested in permaculture as something I practice. I respect enormously. It's one of the few places I have a great deal of hope that indigenous practices revitalized could potentially address what we're talking about. But I don't know, my sense is that both permaculture and indigenous practices overlap, but I really don't know much about it. And I'm actually quite interested. Like I would think how would we take this idea that indigenous people probably have and share it with other people outside of those people who have the knowledge? And it's a very vague statement here. How does permaculture and indigenous practices interrelate, overlap, and how could they be kind of promoted amongst the general public? Kind of large ideas. I'm new here, so where this fits into things, or I'm outside of the history of your process. So I just felt like sharing those two thoughts.
Mahalo. I don't know if Director Gonzer has some input on the interface between homeowners and what they can do. As to your second question, I'm not sure I have an answer to that right now. Director Gonzer, do you have any insight as to what homeowners can do with regards to city arborists and other kinds of interactions or overlaps with that?
Just because I know we're short on time, I'll put some links in the chat directly from the Hawaii Wildfire Management Organization. Certainly in the aftermath and the acute attention around vegetation management, the state DLNR also had to remind people not to just clear cut everything from their property and cut down all the trees in our communities. That was something that we had to counter in some respects, as people were swift to think about how to maintain safety within their neighborhoods and around their households. So there are groups that are also talking about, green breaks, not just fire breaks, like other ways that we can also support through land management, reducing the risk of wildfire. So I'll put a quick chat just from the direct resources from the Hawaii Wildfire Management Organization, and Dr. Romine added additional resources from the Pacific Fire Exchange.
Mahalo. It does seem that there is a strong appetite for looking at these matters. And as I said, if we don't have a brief, I think inviting those who we are already partners with and who have already put out a lot of materials would be very helpful in their outreach efforts. Okay, so at this time, and again, we will find time to agendize this in the future. Again, this is just start, since it's the last meeting of the year, I always like to do this. And then we will move on to agenda 9, which is communications and correspondence from the public. This is the opportunity for the public. Oh, I did not receive any formally from Karan, so I can't remember if the individual who wants to testify should testify now or agenda item 10. What do you think, Matt?
I believe it's for matters not on the agenda.
Okay, so we didn't have any correspondence, so I'm going to move on to public input for matters not on the agenda. And I'm going to ask OCCSR for that individual to please come on and make your testimony known.
Hello, my name's Andy Bates, and I'm sitting in your office by myself. And I have a couple of items of introduction that I'd like to present now. 2 projects that you've discussed a little bit today, but I know some of you do a lot more with. One of the projects is resiliency hubs. And I'm the resiliency hub guy at a place called Christchurch United, which is the first church down from Castle Hospital in Kaneohe. I'm sorry, in Kailua. And we're setting up a resiliency hub. And I'm looking for some direction and help. And I know you've just put a document out, which I know will be very helpful to us. We've gotten letters of support, and I did want to just mention this briefly without getting into a lot of detail, that the main concern of Castle Hospital and the CERT people who are the designated rescue folks in Kailua is a place to safely put their families while they go do their work and rescue people and save people's lives at the hospital immediately after any kind of event. And I'm talking about less than 10 days. So think about Maui, 10 days, the first 10 days after the fire. What's it going to look like the first 10 days when the Pali Highway, the Liki Liki, and H3 are not passable? Which probably is going to be the case with debris and power lines down. So during that period, that we'll really need a lot of resiliency hubs on the windward side. And your document will be very helpful in that effort. And we will hope to tag on to that with you. That's one item. Second item, I'm a sailboat guide. And I teach kids, along with a number of other people, sailboating on Kaneohe Bay at the Kaneohe Yacht Club. We are in the process of setting up a sailing center that incorporates sailing with climate change and how wind and water, sea level rise, and all the stuff that you guys talked about today can be taught inside a sailing curriculum globally at Kaneohe Bay. And your assistance and help in that endeavor would be greatly appreciated, and advice that you might have. The reason why that's a game changer, just so you know, and I'll just say this briefly, Hawaii has sponsored big boat races where large boats come from the mainland, Transpac Race and Pacific Cup. The game changer right now in relationship to tourism and activities on Kaneohe Bay has changed because wind foiling is now an Olympic sport. And everybody wants to come to Hawaii to do the Olympic sports stuff. And our kids from Hawaii have been going out all around the world and winning events. And of course, we can do that because we can practice year round. And people want to come here now from all over the world to become, they call it foiling, to become foilers. And we need help in getting people to engage that from a climate change perspective and a sailboat racing perspective. And I just wanted to introduce that. I look forward to working with many of you in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony and your patience. Thank you, Director Gonzer, for dropping links about the resilience hubs in the chat. This is like key information. I am a huge advocate and fan of resilience hubs, not only for the windward side, I think all over the place. We need more resilience hubs. So I hope that that information is helpful to you. With regard to the sailing, I would encourage you to also pair up, if you have not already, with Kanehunamoku Voyaging Academy, which is run by Bonnie Kahapea. And they are also doing a lot of sailing, traditional Hawaiian sailing, and pairing that also with lessons in resilience. They have a lot of connections with Polynesian Voyaging Society, Malama Honua, and I think that there is some really good alignment, even though it's not traditional sailing, but I still think that I agree that developing what I think of as an oceanic mindset is something, I think that's where you're headed, and I think it's a great idea. I had no idea about the foiling, and I will continue to pay attention to what that means for Hawaii. Any other comments, Brad? I see you dropped some links in the chat.
I just put a plug in for one of our Sea Grant centers, Center for Marine Science Education. There's a link there. There's a lot of resources as far as curriculum on ocean and marine science, and including climate change and sea level rise. But feel free to reach out to us at Sea Grant, any of our extension faculty or folks at that center if you want some assistance on that, including potentially bringing some speakers out to work with you.
Mahalo. Any other comments from public input for matters not on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, want to proceed to the penultimate agenda item, which is announcements. Do any of the commissioners or anyone else have announcements? I see that Commissioner Otsuka has her monthly announcement. I don't know if you want to talk about it, Kiana?
Sure, really briefly, I try to remind folks every month that the State of Hawaii Department of Transportation has an electric bike and electric moped rebate out right now. You are eligible if you're older than 18 and you participate in a low-income program such as SNAP or Section 8 housing vouchers. You don't own a motor vehicle, or you are currently enrolled in school, college, or university, and you can get 20% up to $500 off your e-bike or e-moped. And I put the link in the chat with more information, including the application to apply. Thank you.
Mahalo. Is there any other announcements that we want to bring up this month? Okie dokie.
One more chair, sorry.
Yep.
One more,
Go for it.
another Sea Grant plug. Thanks for our 2023 Hawaii Sea Grant Research Symposium that's happening. If you can get to the University of Hawaii campus, it's at the Keone Auditorium, East West Center, next Friday, a week from today, December 8th, 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. And you can learn about more of the Sea Grant supported research through some brief talks from our researchers and graduate students. I'll share a link to that event for sign-up information. Thanks.
Thanks, Brad. I happen to be presenting at that next week myself. So that's exciting.
I'm as well, yeah. So
I don't know if you want to announce any PyCask. Are there any PyCask seminars happening through the end of the year?
We have our December installment of our Slice of PyCask seminar series is next Tuesday, actually, December 5th, with Professor Joe Gens from University of Hawaii Hilo. That's going to talk about traditional navigation in Polynesia and Micronesia, and use for that in climate adaptation. And he'll be joined by two of his graduate student researchers. I'll put a link to the sign-up information for that. That event is available in person on campus if you happen to be there, or online. So I'll put the sign-up link in for that as well. Thanks for the reminder.
Mahalo. Are there any other opportunities or events happening that are related to climate change? Please drop them in the chat now. If not, we have reached the end of the agenda, and if there are no further comments, this meeting is adjourned. I hope you all have a wonderful and restful remainder of the year, and just remain thankful for our family, thankful for the rains. I know it's a lot, but we need it. And lono i ka makahiki. So aloha, everybody.